Anyone else can talk at this point, by the way, whilst I'm just doing this, because I'm all by myself doing this. Normally, you have someone to help you. I
Have
can.
no tech admin.
Yeah, I've got no tech admin.
Nigel, what's the record behind you?
The record up there is New Order Technique, which is my all-time favourite album.
Oh, yeah.
Released in 1989, 44.3 minutes long, and perfect length for an album. And everyone should go home and listen to it. Maybe is probably my advice.
You know what?
We're halfway there. We're already at home.
Actually, you could intro every brand lab with like your favorite track from the record that you have up there.
Well, I could do that. That would probably be Round and Round off there, or Run 2, the remix of it. But I'm going to leave with an album, so you've got all that to wait. You know, you've got to wait to the end for a music recommendation. Anyway, so I don't think I'm going to get into doing breakout rooms today. So one of the first questions that I'd just be interested to hear from anyone is, when you think about branding, what do you think is more important, words or pictures? What do you think is important in your brand? Has anyone got a point of view about what's more important? Just shout out.
I just want to say that I don't know if this carries over into other meetings, but definitely with film, crap picture or a crap sound. If people can't hear what you're saying, they'll just tune out. No matter how beautiful the images are, they will just tune out. But I don't know how it works in other mediums. There are people who know better than I. Mona can probably tell us how it works for graphic design better than I can.
Great. I think that's a good point. And if you want to just say hello, who you are, and what you do in a sentence as well. So I know Jeremy from Monteluke Films. Anyone else think about what's more important, images then, or words? What's going to be more important for Pete?
It's kind of hard to decide. I'd probably say words because I'm a writer. But on the other hand, I've been looking at colleges for my daughter, and there's been some colors that different universities use. And now when I see those colors, because they're so specific, I associate it with that school, and that implants itself in my brain, which I think is part of how branding works. So I don't know. So now I'm completely undecided, and I'm curious to see what the rest of you guys will say.
So implanting in brain, that's quite an important thing. But you think the image might do that more than the words, or what are you saying? Lost everyone.
I guess surely it's images, right? Because
you're image boy.
I'd say yeah, who knows who's talking. I'd say it's the combination, right? Because if you think about, obviously a logo isn't branding necessarily, but it's an important part of it. And all the most recognizable logos don't necessarily contain any words.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you'd say that the Nike tick by itself doesn't work without the word Nike.
The Nike swoosh.
Yeah. Or is that the Mikey tick?
The Apple logo.
Yeah.
So, same like the Nike. Whenever we see the Nike symbol, we think just do it. You know, which is the tagline, the words behind the brand. So I don't know. I guess I would argue that they really go hand in hand. But I guess if you had to pick one, I would say words are more important, because you can have a beautiful brand visually, but if it's not backed up by well thought out wording and explanation and storytelling around what you do, then it's not going to be as effective. And I think you can have a really less than stellar or mediocre brand, but if you're really good at storytelling around the brand, it will succeed a bit more.
But then you really have to follow up those words with actions. So it's just
Mike.
On a step, it's a process, right? If you got the good pictures, you need the good words, but then you need the actions. Otherwise the previous two are useless.
So true.
Shall I interject?
Start.
All right. My background is as an art director in advertising, and one of the things that gets overlooked is actually the brand is such an important part of your whole marketing. How many of you remember the advertising campaign being tangoed? If anyone can. or the last one that I worked, we were renaming a business, and we called it Very. The whole reason was you could hang so much messaging off of that. It's language, but also the visual. I mean, I got brought in by a branding agency. Their whole thing was pure. Well, it wasn't purely. I mean, the brand name was so important. But for me, it was this thing of, if we can get it into the language. I mean, my strap line is, why walk when you could stride? What's the business called? Stride. It's, if it becomes part of the language, of being tangoed or whatever. So it's all integral. But what you want to do is you want people to retain it. So the branded strap line is such an underused, undervalued thing. But as I say, the whole reason we ended up with Very was, we can hang this. It's great. We can use it in lots of different ways. So really important. I mean, my background initially, advertising is words and images. Neither, they both play to their strengths when they integrate. So when I work with a business to name them, I've always further down the line thinking, God, what messaging could that work with?
So you like to think of both the words and the pictures, maybe a bit of colouring in at the end or something.
Yeah, exactly. Try not to go over the lines.
Try not to go over the lines. So, and I think what the point there is that there's lots of different elements that make up a brand. I'm just going to do a quick introduction to myself. I think most of you do know me, but in case there's people that are watching who might be joining us later. First of all, welcome to Brand Lab. This is a monthly thing that I do, and the plan is to get different people coming in. Hopefully you can see my screen. That's the other thing that I'm supposed to say at this stage. And why Brand Lab? And I think this is my mind map that I actually drew about 2 years ago, in its essence, when I first met Deborah, who's going to be talking later, about what it is that I'm sort of trying to do in my brand. And obviously it's kind of quite complex, looks quite complicated, maybe overly complicated. And I generally think that branding can seem overly complicated. And I think, as a brand creator, and I know there's image makers here and writers and other people and some brand owners, is that I actually think the brand owners have the answers to their brands. I generally do. And I think as consultants and creators, we should help bring that clarity to what that brand is. We're not the creators, if you like, of that brand. They are the creators and the owners of that brand, and we can help them bring that clarity. And I certainly believe that I can help demystify the process and help anyone untangle their brands, whatever it might be. And that's the purpose in Brand Lab, to come along as owners, creators, whatever you are, to do with branding, chat about branding, open the conversation, learn a little bit and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, I've done lots of things in my past, including Ford, which I did the visual identity for 20 years or so ago. About 10 years ago, I did the online retailer Soak and Sleep, which is all about naming. And then more recently, I've worked with things like Radio Player, digital radio app. And I've always sort of thought about brands in terms of identity. Increasingly, it's more about strategy and naming. I have a point of view about what I think a brand is, what it stands for. And for me, it's all about the emotional connection. Interesting, when we mentioned Nike, the tick, the swoosh, Laura sort of mentioned that it's all about the just do it. That's the first thing that comes to her. I'm not a big Nike fan, actually. I'm more of an Adidas. I don't read the Telegraph. I read the Guardian. And for me, a brand is about creating that emotional connection, whether you're writing, whether you're drawing, creating, illustrating, or whatever, is that you need to enable people to see that they've made the right choice, make them feel that they've made the right choice about the brand that they're going to commit to. I have a whole kind of methodology behind this, my brand donut, about understanding the vision, but it breaks down really in that you've got to be doing three things. First of all, getting the right insight, make sure whatever you do is relevant, getting the story, making it unique and different to what everyone else does, and then you've got to be engaging, you've got to make it memorable. There's so many brands, I think, that forget that ultimately they've got to make it more memorable and more engaging. And that's sort of like my philosophy around branding, really. But also, there's so many things that go on, and the way that you link business through to strategy, through to delivery, and all that side of things. And today we're just going to focus on one tiny little bit of the jigsaw, which is all about verbal side of it. So kind of going to talk maybe more about messaging, but I'll also mention something about naming. But we could have an hour's conversation about almost any part of Jigsaw, and probably 10 hours and 10 weeks of conversations about any point, because there is so much content to think about as brand creators and brand owners. And that's where, you know, we come in and help demystify that process. So first off today, I'm going to introduce you to a guest that I've worked with probably now not quite 2 years. I met Deborah sort of maybe at the start of my journey in lockdown, really, when I was sort of looking around for things to do. And one of the things that I thought I should do is actually probably learn some more skills. And one of the skills that I was really keen to learn about was about writing. So I joined Deborah's, probably it was like doing a 5-day challenge, or, you know, it's a classic thing, download a PDF, join a 5-day challenge, have a conversation, join the course and learn loads. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and introduce you to Deborah, who's going to tell you some things about writing.
Good to see you all, and thank you for being here. I'm going to, let's see.
I might need to give you permission.
Oh, awesome. I have the power now to share my screen. Hang on a second.
You got the power.
It just says you disabled screen sharing. Let me see. I'll try again. Can you click it again? See if that works.
Try one more thing. Let me just do this.
Okay. Well, as you can tell from my accent, I'm from the US, and I began to use LinkedIn after I had tried other methods, and I'll go through that in a minute. But basically, let me go through this here. If you're kind of interested in learning how to use LinkedIn and you want to have more impact, this is what I'm about to share with you guys will really help. And I also recommend that, if you can, take some notes so that if you want to use LinkedIn, my advice is take some notes on what I'm saying and think about, what can I do in the next 7 days? That way you really truly benefit from what I'm telling you today. If you've been on LinkedIn at all, you might have noticed other people are using it. You wonder if it's really working. You wonder if you could get it to work more or better or at all. And if you like to have fun growing your business and creating relationships with people, LinkedIn can be really good for you. It's not for everyone, but those are just some things to think about. And if you want those things, then LinkedIn can be really good for you. And I'm going to share some of the results that my students have achieved, that my clients have achieved. I'm going to sprinkle them throughout just so you can kind of see what's possible. So everything that I'm talking about comes from either my work with students or from my own experience on LinkedIn. And then this I already told you, so I'm going to skip that. And basically, I'm going to talk about what anti-boring content is, how I define it, and how to start creating content for LinkedIn so you can get more opportunities there. And opportunities can look like clients, speaking engagements, getting on a podcast, whatever it is you're looking for to help you grow your business. LinkedIn can probably help you achieve that through certain methods. So basically, for the past 6 years, LinkedIn has been my primary way, my number one way of growing my business and generating a profit. I love it. And during the, more like stay inside part of the pandemic, when we couldn't go out to networking events as much, then it really, really became useful then. So I was really glad to have that in my back pocket. So in the past, this is basically the part where I tell you some things about me so that I know what I'm talking about. I'm not some random person that Nigel plucked off the street somewhere, but I worked for the Red Cross for many years. I worked in digital marketing. I raised over $100 million for them through digital methods. And as you can imagine, it took long hours. Hurricanes are not solved quickly. So we had a lot of long days and I kind of got tired of that. So I took another job. But then, of course, that was also a lot of long days. So I wanted to have a life. I wanted to see, my dad, who was sick at the time. So I started a business. As we all know, as business owners, that doesn't really help with the 12-hour day thing too terribly much. But my dream was that it would one day. So I started my business as a marketing consultant. And then I evolved a little bit when an ad agency owner asked me to write his book. He's like, a lot about digital marketing. A lot about writing. Can you help me write my book? I said, no way. And then, of course, we did it. And then it went really well. And I went on to work on a lot of other books, like on music, sales, and then this one over here is the one on digital marketing. So anyway, so that was really cool. I realized for my business, I shifted my business to work more on books and content for people, but I realized that marketing for $1 billion organization like the Red Cross is a little bit different than marketing for one's own business, which is not $1 billion organization. And that's when I realized LinkedIn was the answer. And because of my writing background and having worked as a copywriter to put myself through grad school, creative writing grad school, I sold a lot of citrus. And that's kind of where I first saw the possibility for, these words can actually help, generate action, sales, increase business, and so on. So I began to start exploring what I could do on LinkedIn. And then people began to ask me for help. And that's kind of where I came to meet Nigel and other people, because I was helping them figure out how to do this. And then results started to come in from people. These are results from people who took my free 5-day content writing challenge, people who worked with me as students and clients, and people like this top left one, the person said they had their most successful post ever, and then, had one that was even more successful. So these are the kinds of things that happen for people. And I think it's important to know, like, one of the myths I want to burst is that you don't have to have tons of comments. You don't have to have it all together 100% when you first start on LinkedIn. You can kind of take these baby steps, and maybe your first several posts don't really get many comments or don't get a lot of likes. It's all part of the process. So, if you've tried LinkedIn and you thought, oh, it didn't work, it's worth giving it another try if that's something you're interested in doing. So overall, this is what anti-boring content is. It originates from the personable. And so that differs from personal, because personal is more like that awkward oversharing, or maybe that time where we felt like a victim and we talked too much about it. But personable is more about how we're connecting with people, showing empathy, and being distinctive, which I'll talk more about later. It appeals to your reader. So we're really clear on who our market is, on who our people are, and then we're going to take them somewhere so they have an aha moment. Now, that said, not every piece of content has to, elicit an aha from people, but we do want to be answering their questions, helping them see us in a certain way, and all that kind of thing. And then it satisfies your reader in some way, like they've either learned something, they're, feeling a certain way about something, so it gives them some kind of an experience. And then here's how we do it. There's these 5 questions that are important to answer in all your in all your content. The first one is who. So we talk a lot about mastering your market, and you're a pretty savvy group. About talking, about your talking to your audience. What can really help you with your content and being anti-boring is just thinking through what are the questions they have, like that mind map you saw of Nigel's, thinking through what are the questions they have, what is it that they need to know about me, what do they need to know to feel comfortable, and how do they need to feel before they're going to reach out to me? Do they need to feel secure, confident? Like, what is it that they need to know so that they'll be willing to take that next step? And this applies whether you're doing B2C or B2B, because even B2B is made up of individuals, right? So it's all about how we work with humans. The next part, which is the what, is just mapping out your ideas, kind of like the way you saw Nigel did, making kind of a non-linear mind map of all the possible ideas you could write about. And then going beyond answering questions and so on to thinking about what are things that happen to me in my daily world that I can turn into a story that's going to help someone see something in a different way, or that's going to make someone feel something. Because, a lot of you guys work in branding, branding relates to a feeling that we leave people with. And that's really important. So Valerie was one of my students, and she was really excited after using what I taught her how to do, because she was able to win new business more easily, and really excited because during her time with me, she got 2 new clients, and she's gone on to continue doing that. She's a career coach in her case. And then the next thing is why. So Simon Sinek made the why very famous, but we all kind of knew that, but he explained it in such a clear way. And so making sure that we talk about the why, like we all know we're supposed to have a why, and we all probably do have a why, but are we talking about it? That's the other thing. So writing some content that brings forth why you do your work is really important, and it helps people feel comfortable with you and also align with you. And it's also going to help you attract more of the people that you do want to work with and who can most benefit from your work. The next one is why now? or in copywriting terms, this can also be considered urgency of some kind. So if you're in a business where it's like people keep kicking the can down the street or whatever and just never sign up, that's going to be a little bit different, or you might need a slightly different business strategy than someone who does the kind of work that people need immediately. Like, if you have a medical condition, that's something that might need immediate help, right? Like we go to the emergency room or whatever it is. But if it's something like we're like, oh, I'll just keep putting it off. We humans, we tend to put things off. So thinking about why people will move forward with you is really important. And again, this is something that a lot of us know, but we don't always have the time to sit down and think about it strategically, but it's really important with your content. And then you just weave it into your content. And so when this person began to write more content on LinkedIn, they began to get a lot more interest in their coaching services. This is a person who is from Ireland, and she was really excited about that because she's like, the economy is not great right now. This is a few years ago, but she's like, I'm doing fine. And she was really happy about that result there. The other thing we need to think about is why no one else. So that comes to distinctiveness. How are we distinctive from other people who do something similar to us? For me, I have a poetry background. Not a lot of people have that. I have trained as a coach. A lot of my leadership coaching clients like that. A number of people like it that I have a marketing background. So you just never know what it is that someone's going to see in you. One of my sales clients said, I really like it that you have a literary eye. I never thought a sales guy would actually appreciate having a poet work on his book, but he did. So it's like whoever you are could really appeal to other people in some way that you don't expect. So these are just some of the kinds of things that can happen on LinkedIn. I like to share this because sometimes people will say, does LinkedIn really work? Can I really have any, can I really get clients that way? But it's true that you really can. And it's when you're consistent and when you consistently share the content that people need to hear about, that's when it begins to happen. And it's not overnight either, right? Like it does take some work like anything. And if you want to connect more, here's my website link. I've got a couple different free things that you can take part in. The 57 content ideas, as well as a monthly roundtable. And I'm happy to take any questions you have if there's still time. Yeah, Laura.
Thanks a lot, Deb. That's great. Anyone got any questions before I jump in? So, Laura, hi.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you feel like your poetry background has especially informed and helped and set you apart in what you do? And with that, who is your favorite poet?
Oh, favorite poet. That's a hard one. Okay, I'll answer that second because that's hard. I think it was someone who was it? Rilke maybe said talked about dingadicto, which was like dense language, and I always like that idea of like the density of language and how much can be done in so few words. So I love that, and it's something I like to extend over into my prose. What can I cut out? How can I make this more clear? How can I find a turn of phrase that will help this be more distinctive while also talking to my people? So that's really cool. As for my favorite poet, I don't know, probably someone more contemporary. I love Sylvia Plath. She's so confessional, very New England feel. I like Elizabeth Bishop. She feels more expansive and tropical. So those are a few people that I like a lot.
Tropical. I've never heard any sort of linguistic thing described as tropical, and you associate it with drinks. But that's absolutely great. Thanks for the question, Laura. Has anyone else got any questions for Deborah about writing, content, words, or anything of that sort? I mean, I've got a question that I always sort of come back to, which I think is reasonably important. This distinction between personal and personable. So I don't know whether this has been a trend over the last few years, but everyone seems to have been on a narrative arc and a personal journey, and and all that sort of personal stuff that goes into things. But you talk a lot more about personable. Why is that? What's important about that, do you think?
There's a certain kind of story, and I don't know if it's affected the UK as much as it has the US, but it's like that pull yourself up by your bootstrap story. We over here cannot seem to tire of the story, but some people are tired. I mean, some people are tired of it. Some people can, read it all day long. And I think that if you have a story that's somewhat different from that, it helps you stand out. And also some people not everybody has a life full of trauma and drama. And so I think that, people who have more static lives can also have stories that are very interesting as well, maybe something they discovered. And so I like to push the envelope on that a little bit with regards to what stories, we end up telling about ourselves.
I've heard other people sort of talk about that, express it as don't sort of talk and write about the wound, sort of write about the scar that sort of happened. And I do feel sometimes that some of those that are just, here's the wound, I've still got the wound, I need to fix the wound. You've kind of run out of room on that sort of story. Also intrigued to know if anyone else in the room, because I think I'm fairly predictable. I went to college, did brand design, kind of graphic design, has anyone else got more unusual backgrounds than what they do now? Did anyone else like a poetry writer, or did you used to juggle, Mike, or something like that, maybe? Or
I've got no coordination in that respect to be able to do that. I studied media at school, studied film and media at university, and then although to be fair, it's quite unusual for people who study media to then go into it. I think we were certainly faced with the choice of, we can either go into the industry as it is, film and television, work at the bottom and build our way up and eventually get to the position where you can make your own stuff, which is fine. But we kind of had success with a creative film. Our graduation piece got into a local international film festival, and we were commissioned by our university to make a film after we graduated as well, to interview students about a course they were running. And it just like, well, these are signs, aren't they? This is the calling to the call to action, So for, well, let's run our own business. We'll have jobs on the side. We'll do our own business on the side, and in between that, we'll still make our own films. And I guess we're quite fortunate to be able to do that. And I've been now doing it full time for 9 years. So even that feels like a privilege every day, to work with yourself every day, but also do something that you enjoy.
It would be a privilege to work with you every day for 9 years, Mike. Absolutely.
Well, don't ask Chris and Louise that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that from the distance of Zoom, but and I do think that it's that sort of we have such a as the creators, we have lived in this world so much. If I could ask anyone in the room who's maybe had to try and do their own branding, so I'm going to talk about Deborah's branding, and maybe Deborah, you could ask this. So you're a creator, you use words and stuff, but when it came to your own branding, what was so difficult for you about that process?
I think sometimes finding the words for one's own work can be the hardest thing to do. This is something that, when I work with people on their books, I can see their story right away, and then they don't see it because they lived it. And I'll be pulling pieces out, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is it. And so that's kind of the same experience I had with Nigel. He would like ask questions and pull things out, and he's like, and here it is. And it's like he gave me this huge platter of fruit or something that I hadn't seen was there before.
More pineapples. And yeah, so I worked with I kind of learned through Deborah about some of the things that she's talked about, and I particularly actually liked the use of language. And then we were sort of carried on kind of chatting and stuff like that, and she approached me to help her with her brand, and it was a kind of honor to be asked, actually. And I'm just going to share with you kind of what the output was rather than what it was before. But if Deborah wants to have just shared this sort of couple of slides, maybe if there's anything that you feel that you gained from the process that was unexpected, or anything that kind of was exciting. I mean, I'm just going to boil this down into sort of 3 basic slides, really. Is that for Deborah's brand, if the screen moves over, which I don't think it will in a second, maybe. I think with all brands and all sort of visual identities, you need this difference between what we call fixed elements and flexible elements, and it will change from brand to brand. So for this brand, you're very fixed on white, orange and black as colours and a typeface. That is it. Fix those, don't mess with those. But then actually create more flexible elements. So there's an orange colour, but it's kind of what we call a living orange. So it varies all the time. It varies across that. Obviously we do need images, but I think what was unusual, and maybe Debbie, you could talk about you know, as a writer, what I found quite unusual was your images that you'd created, that you'd made. And I thought, well, why don't we use your pictures, because they tell, you know, as much of a story as your words. Back to the initial question, you talk a little bit about your photography and why you started taking odd pictures of umbrellas.
I've taken I've really enjoyed photography ever since I took a class in high school, and I even thought about becoming a photojournalist, and I was in the journalism program in college for a short while to study photojournalism, and then I ended up not continuing on that path, but I kept taking photographs. And so when I came to Nigel, I said I'd really like to use my own photographs in my work, and I didn't really know how to do it. And one of the misconceptions I have is I had to keep like having new photographs all the time, whereas Nigel said, well, you can really have a set that you can reuse, like, you know, X number of photographs. And so that was good, because I'll just keep making new things all the time, whereas Nigel has saved me a lot of time by being like, you really don't need all that, you can have less and it's more effective. And so that's fantastic. And I don't know, this is the big poster, and you can see the umbrellas on the back. The umbrellas were from an installation in Silver Spring, Maryland, and they were hanging from a ceiling. And so I was walking underneath it and just took a picture upward. And I'm just trying to see if there's any of the other photographs there. I guess not. But
I think you raise a good point, is that, you know, we get over familiar with our own brands, and so we feel the need to keep on refreshing and keep on changing them. Obviously, within what I created for Deborah is, you know, there is a system there that gives a bit of flexibility. I wouldn't get over obsessed on social formats because they seem to change all the time. But, you know, there is a bit of discipline there, but ultimately there's ultimate flexibility as well to kind of do what you want, providing you can keep on thinking of words and keep seeing interesting photographs. The rest of it will take care of itself. Initially, when I created this, I said it's kind of almost like a brand without a logo, but we did create a logo in the end and put the Deborah Ager, which is really just so that people can see it. This brand doesn't need a logo on it at all for people to start recognising it. So if anyone's got any more questions for Deborah, either pop them into the chat or connect with her. Do share your thoughts. And I'm going to just start. I just wanted to do a little thing about, you know, things that I've seen recently that I thought you might find interesting. And if anyone's got anything that they want to add, I'll just share this one with you, and then we can maybe talk about it. So I think this is just kind of like, I live in the world of branding, even though I sort of try not to. I just can't avoid it. And everything I see and read, I'm just thinking about it from a brand sort of point of view. And this issue came up this week. So people in the UK were all very familiar with the P&O story for our US friends. Basically, P&O, you might have read, a global brand that does shipping, a ferry company, and they basically sacked a whole bunch of workers, made them redundant overnight, which in the UK is illegal, so that they could effectively rehire them on much lower salaries. So a big sort of PR disaster. The government is still arguing with them today about the legalities of that. And so it's been big news about the illegal, it's called fire and rehire. And P&O have admitted that what they've done is probably wrong, but it's what they need to do. So rather than pay $10 an hour, they can re-employ people on $2 an hour, £10 or £2, whatever you say. So a bit of a disaster. And I saw this ad over the weekend, and it was just kind of piqued my curiosity. I hope P&O are boycotted by every customer who wants a cruise. And it's probably a fairly typical response that you might expect when someone like P&O has done that kind of despicable act, all front page news. And the ad sort of went on to say, we've received a lot of messages like this, like the one above during the past week. Then it goes on, as we come out of it, to say, but it doesn't. Our names may both begin with P&O, but that's where the similarity ends. We are separate organisations and have been for 20 years. Our amazing crew is proud, this is what we do the best, etc. And the point being is that the people that were attacking the P&O company were attacking P&O cruises rather than P&O ferries. And, you know, that's kind of quite a common thing, that people just latched onto the first bit of the brand and then not realise the distinction between the ferry business, which is in trouble, and P&O Cruisers. And you sort of think, well, that's, you know, you think, should we feel sorry now for P&O Cruisers because they've kind of they've had some of this toxicity put into their brand. And I was thinking about this, and in reality, I think if you think back to P&O, you know, it's company's nearly 200 years old, and is a big British shipping logistics, founded in 1837, called P&O, really, really famous. It was sold actually by the government. It was owned by the public, sold by the government, probably for loads of money, probably not enough money. And that was many years ago. But prior to that, about 20 years ago, P&O Cruisers was founded as a restructuring as part of their P&O business. And so they've benefited from the P&O name for the last 20 years. What they haven't done is put anything in place to help customers understand the distinction between who they are and what they do and what the actual P&O business is, because they're not owned by anything to do with DP World. They're owned by a totally different entity. And so now P&O Ferries, totally different company, has that toxic nature to it, which actually is now going to impact P&O Cruisers. My advice to them would be to think really seriously about changing your name, but they probably should have changed their name maybe, I would say 10 years or so ago. Had 10 years of, you know, literally kind of following the wind of P&O, but actually sort of trying to break away because you never know what happens. So that was my brand news for this week. I don't know if anyone else has got anything interesting that they've seen in the branding world that they want to share.
I do. I have something from, I have something, let me see if I can find, oh, okay. I'm just going to put the link down below and then people can just go to the website.
Cool.
It's for this college. It's called the College of Wooster. First off, I'm just going to put my LinkedIn in there so people can connect with me there. But this website is for the College of Wooster here in the US. It's in Ohio. And if you, I was thinking about this because I'm looking for colleges for my daughter now. And I was thinking about how schools as a brand do or don't distinguish themselves. There are a lot of colleges just in the state of Pennsylvania, for instance, like hundreds, right? So it's like, how are you going to go after this finite resource of students? And College of Wooster is interesting because, you know, they're not Harvard, they're not Yale, they don't have like tons of name, you know, like that level of recognition. But if you look towards the bottom left, they bury what I think is the most interesting thing. It's this yellow rectangle that says America's premier college for mentored undergraduate research. Whoa, like if that's what you want, this is where you go, because no one else is saying that. And this is what they focus on. And they talk about guiding students and supporting students. And so if that's what you're looking for, to have that research experience and to be able to do research yourself, then this would be the school for it, or at least this is what they claim. So I was just thinking about that. And I guess in this case, going back to the question Nigel had at the beginning, is it words or imagery? I'd even say that I think here their words, even though they're buried, these words to me seem even stronger than the branding. You know, like I don't even care about the fonts or whatever this logo is, but just hearing that, I'm like, that sounds cool. Also, if my daughter wants that, I'm going to suggest she take a look at the school.
So that descriptor, America's premier college for mentored undergraduate research, is the thing that would tip it for you. And do people find that quite a lot, that you have those sort of messages that are buried, or that actually you do need the long message for people to understand? But have anyone have a point of view on that? We might come back to, anyone got a point of view on the P&O debacle and P&O Ferries and Cruisers? Just curious to sort of know if anyone's been brand watching this week. Not that, you know, could do bird watching instead, I guess.
Well, I had a something to share, but it's mostly visual, so I'm not sure if it applies. But I just wanted to kind of say that, yeah, I see this all the time with my own clients. They just don't know what is so important about what they do and what they offer. And I don't really think there's any way around that, because I have the same problem myself. You know, I actually wish there were someone that specialized in brand agencies, because we're designers and we're kind of brand architects. We really kind of have to, you know, walk the talk essentially, and we really have to serve ourselves in a way. But it is extremely hard to kind of see the forest for the trees. And I feel like every client I have there's always something that they just kind of don't get about, that's so cool, really, when you make it really simple about what they do. And I just wanted to say really quick, Deb, that I resonated so much with what you said about your background in poetry. And I didn't go to school for what I did. I was an English major in college. And so I think I have a kind of a special connection with people that ended up finding their way into this field through some other field. And I think in the end, for me, it's about communicating well into the right people and making sure that when those people come across your brand touch points, they make like beautiful, perfect sense. And I just loved what you said about, honing language and making sure to, separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and make sure that, the most powerful message comes through. So I don't really answer your question, Nigel, but.
No, that was good. I know Jeremy had something to say. I think what I'm taking from that though is that, as much as a brand might create something that's, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, all those kind of things, that message there about, being the premier education, whatever it was, I can't remember now. If it gets too buried because of everything else that's going on, you do lose the focus and you do lose the meaning. And I think that's always a shame. And I think that's what we're always trying to do is bring that to the level quicker and sooner so that people get it. I mean, just like, you said right at the start, just do it on night, just do it. And well, they spend billions of dollars on that a day probably. And so it, and a lot of people forget about that. Jeremy, did you have something to add, or did your thing get answered? Sorry.
I was just going to say that I found that my brand seems to be less and less important because people interact with me as a person rather than my brand. And so that I half wonder if I should just call myself Jeremy Levis Films, because that would be more straightforward. Whereas the Monty Lupo Films isn't that important. It's all about my name recognition. That's what seems to work. So I think obviously as if I were to expand my business, which I'm not particularly looking to do, then Monty Lupo Films becomes much more useful. But for those of us that intend to stay as one-man bands or small collectives, then our names is probably more important than the brand.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I can see Pete's got a question as well, and I will briefly answer that because I definitely started off as Pin Creative because I did have a team and a business. I will say I've now morphed into Nigel Davies, which is me anyway. But I do regret not making more of myself as a name when I created that business. And I think you're absolutely right. If your plan is to build a team and grow, then it is helpful to have the brand name. But I think actually even as individuals, it's quite useful to have a business name that actually helps differentiate from the business and the activities that you're doing and you as the person. In fact, I'll send you a link because I've got a little quiz that helps actually answer 10 questions and get the answer to what you should be doing. And it's all about how comfortable you are with personal profile, stuff like that. But it's definitely a thing that I know. I've had this chat with Deborah, who, Radiant Media, Nigel Pin Creative, Jeremy Levi's Montalute Film. Laura, what's your business called at the moment? Atelier Works, isn't it? Atelier, yeah. And so we've all got them.
Atelier LKS, you even said it right.
Yeah. So and I think that's an ongoing question. I think increasingly though, back to Deborah talking about LinkedIn, probably using personal LinkedIn profiles, personal social profiles is better for someone like yourself, someone like myself, than actually using a business profile on those things. Pete, you had a question. Sorry,
but Nigel, that you on your thing you discussed with Nigel Davis on here. You haven't. Yeah. I've done put your company name behind you.
No, I haven't. I probably should have done at the start.
No, it's just, but I think that's instructive because what we're seeing there is that's how it works.
I do when I'm told to and reminded to. I've got to admit. Whereas Laura's put design doctor because that's how she's talking about herself at the moment because she's the doctor of design. That's not the business name. Mike Jelves, he's the ice cream man. I know that, and he hasn't put that on, which would then lead to many more questions. Conscious of time, but Pete, you've got a question. Bayer's got a question. So, Pete, over to you. That wasn't
a question. It was just a real quickie because, as Deborah pointed out, the selling point was buried, which is what most businesses do, relying on the fact that the amount of time I hear people saying, well, they'll find it. No, because most websites, I won't get into facts and figures, but I mean, only 3% of website visitors actually turn to making an inquiry, because 97% of people look at a website and go, is the information there? But people say to me, well, how do I find my selling point? What should I say about myself? And I say, spin it around. What do people want to know about you? If you understand, you've heard me talk about AP and S. Understand your audience. What are their pain points and how do you solve them? And the solutions are your selling points. And if you know who you're talking to, it's whether you're a designer or whatever. If Laura understands the problems that her client base face, and that comes up repeatedly. I mean, I say to clients, if you really want to know what your selling points are, ask existing and previous clients. They will probably tell you things that you didn't realize. Really? That's why you chat? Yeah. So for me, it's always think less about what you want to say, but what does your audience want to hear? And that's really, really important. So
thank you.
There we go.
Thanks for that, Pete. I don't know if Bayo's still got a question, but I'm sure he'll come back off.
I have.
And then we go to Mona. Yep.
Right. It's not a question, it's just a follow-up from Jeremy, really. And Pete will add to this story. I mean, I didn't start my business till my 50s, and so therefore I knew I was not going to be running or creating a corporate identity. But I wasn't too vain to accept that maybe calling it after my name will be just good for me and what I was trying to do. So Bigo coaching came about with the help of Pete. But I think Jeremy's point's really interesting, that you could create a name and then run with it. So Nike, for example, is actually pronounced Nike in Yoruba, which is my sister's name. And my sister was born in 1972, the year that Nike apparently started off. Which name is more famous? Again, that's a different story.
Thanks for that, Bayo. And yeah, I mean, we can talk about naming in a lot more detail, and probably will. I heard that Nike rhymed with crikey, but I still don't have a definitive answer to that. But that's one thing that I was told. So, and I actually quite like. I mean, Bayo, who's on the call, on I think hopefully he's part of driving, because he's far too exciting for driving around listening to. But you know, he actually, I think it's quite clever, because you've gone for a company called Big O Consulting. So it's sort of, the name is hidden within it, and so there's a empathy back towards it. Mona, you had a question. I need to answer a couple of questions for other people that were not here today, but I will answer them.
Well, it's not really a question. Yeah, it's a bit feedback, because I do my own branding because I'm a designer myself, but my own branding color scheme happen to be like purple and pink. So sometimes business owners tell me, well, I'm not sure about using you because your own branding is not corporate enough. But I think it's my own branding. I'm entitled to use the colors I want. I'm not too worried about that, because 60% of my clients are male, and some of them are actually mature businesses. Yeah, so I just think the colors for the color schemes probably sometimes
that leads on to a really good question, actually, that I was asked, that I'm going to answer about, you know, choosing colors. So I'm just going to I think that Deb asked me what my favorite brand was, and what most people know me, one of my favorite brands is Guinness. And what I've got to say is that Guinness 0%, and this is, if I was on commission, I would be making lots of money now. Guinness 0% is an amazing drink. Canned, you would drink it just like you drink Coca-Cola, non-alcoholic, 0%. Even my local landlord, which may be saying something about what he knows about beer, says when he drinks it, he can't really taste the difference between the alcoholic version and the non-alcoholic version, which I find quite extreme. So Deb asked me that question about what's my favourite brand, so that was just a quick one. But I got this question from Pam Holland. I'm just going to answer this. So thanks, Pam, for your question. But Pam has a business called Mindful Decluttering and Organising. And the question is, leaning to what Mona was just talking about, is what is the best way to choose brand colours, specifically written the American way here. And I think it's really, you've got to first of all decide whether you want to stand out or blend in. And there's a lot to be said for adopting colours that are like some of your competition, or choosing something different. I do actually believe you need to choose colours that you like and your audience like, but more importantly, what you like, because you've got to live with it. I have met people who go, I really hate my brand because I hate my colours. I go, well, why have you got colours that you dislike? I mean, fortunately, there's enough people in the world that will like purple and blue, I think you said, or purple and pink and blue, and that's absolutely fine. So I would go with what you like. And then really importantly, you do need to create contrast across the colour palette, and it's becoming increasingly important. And just as a final tip for anyone who is going out and looking to create colour palettes, here's a web link. I'm going to put some web links in at the end, but just go and use some of the resources that will really help you. This one is particularly good because it helps you find colour palettes based on images. So you just look at photographs you find beautiful and appealing and get the colours out of it. And this is what I mean. There's so much stuff out there that can actually help you do these things. And, you know, colour palettes, don't be afraid of it. But I would say, first of all, decide if you want to stand out, blend in, then actually get onto something you like and create contrast. I also got a question from Felicity Francis of Talk Networking, and she asked me, how do you manage colour blindness? And I think this is really interesting because it's an increasingly, you know, back to that point about making contrast, but making sure that people can actually access the accessibility and actual consideration for others. And, you know, if I put this on screen, many of us, certainly in the more visual, may be able to see more of these symbols than others, but some of us will struggle. And whilst I can't give you lots of kind of UX-y type tips about how to actually solve the color problem, I mean, I think, you know, contrast, type size, these are all really important on digital spaces, etc. I did find this website which you can go to, and it's a colorblind web filter, so you can select what kind of color blindness you want to look for and then see what your website looks like. So that's my website, and I think my website I was kind of pleased with until I went to one of the pages where I actually feel like I'm letting people down. So this orange type on a black box probably is increasingly difficult for people to read. So I think I probably should stop that very soon. So that was you know, my tip for now, and I'll put these links into the end. And that just brings us on to, forget about brand news, onto band news. But before we go there, has anyone got any questions that they want to ask about branding before we wrap up with a record recommendation, which is something that I've done for many years when I've been presenting. Mike, over to you.
I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but I think we've flirted with the edges of the difference between a personal brand and your business brand. Because personally, I'm part of a business with 3 people. The business has a brand. And the more I think about it, the more it's important that the 3 of us as individual people have brands, because ultimately with the networking we do, you might meet me before you meet my colleagues and before you understand the business. So I think it's, and as Jeremy, you were saying, your personal brand is almost ahead of what your business is. Your business name is relatively incidental in that respect. So how do we feel about that, the importance of the personal brand being separate from the business brand? And even if you are a business, you still have to separate those 2 parts of your psyche, right?
Personally, yeah, that's why I think it's still relevant for me to have Pin Creative as a registered legal entity rather than Nigel Davies Limited, because I do want that slight differentiation. Also, it depends on who you're working with as well. So my corporate clients, sort of, you know, those sort of global ones, when they're sending contracts through and all that, it just gets you through procurement a lot quicker. It just does. There's less questions, and I think it's all going to depend on the sort of audience that you have. But I'll put a link to this PDF. It's a single page PDF, like, you know, rate from 1 to 5. Do you like being on social media, or do you hate it? And you'll decide if you want to be it's like a Cosmo quiz for those that know Cosmo, just about branding. So very, 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 very much more interesting. So, well, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. If you've got any more questions, you know, drop me a line or whatever. I'm going to be doing this every month, having different guests. So I'd like to thank Deborah for being my guest today. Very much enjoyed listening to you as usual, and I always learn something when I talk with Deborah. And I hadn't seen the oats, originates, appeals, takes someone somewhere and satisfied. So that's my new learning. Bayer's got a quick question before we wrap up. Thanks, Bayer.
Okay, Nigel. As you know, I'm driving my son to football, so I can't really copy on the chat. Is it possible for you to send that out to us?
Yes, I'll send the chat room to you, Bayo. I think that's GDPR compliant. I've got no idea. There's a GDPR person that was going to be here, who fortunately isn't. But yeah, and also be sending a link round. So yeah, thanks for that. So I'll leave you with a music recommendation. So this is what you should all be listening to at the moment. This is sort of, well, the album actually came out last year. You might have seen the film. Just let me get in my notes here. The Wes Anderson French Dispatch. Has anyone seen that? Which is very Wes Anderson, as you may expect. Well, within that film, there's a character called Tip Top. There's Tip Top. You see him on the posters around, and you see them in the cafe listening to Tip Top on a record. If you didn't know, Tip Top is actually Jarvis Cocker, and he's recorded a whole album of French pop music in the 60s, sung in French. It's an absolute delight. I put the link in there. If for more of those French Anglophiles, it's got Letitia from Stereolab sings on it as well. And it's literally just him. Now, obviously, because this is all about branding and marketing, you can just go out and buy this record. Now, the version I bought, I actually got from the ABKO record shop in Paris, because they sent it with a nice poster. So that was a bit of a gimmick, a poster that I'll never put anywhere. But because I could buy it, I thought I should. They charged me more money. But secretly, I just wanted the 7-inch single. So complete sucker for all the extras that can come with these things these days. So thank you very much for joining us on Brand Lab. We'll do it all again next month. Probably have a different record, more than likely. Different guests, different topics. And hope to see you there.
Thanks for having me as a guest, and thanks to everyone for being here too.
Thank you, folks. Pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.